Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The first one stood motionless between the corn rows at 9:47 p.m. I checked the time on my truck's dashboard because I wanted to remember when everything started going wrong. It looked human-shaped but too tall, maybe 8 feet. Its head touched the top of the mature corn stalks. I hit the brakes hard. My tires crunched on the gravel road. I was driving from Cedar Rapids to my sister's farm near Walker, taking the back roads to avoid traffic. The night was clear and cold for September. A half moon lit up the fields on both sides. I'd made this drive dozens of times over the past 5 years, since Sarah moved out here with her husband. Nothing weird had ever happened before. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, facing my truck, about 30 feet ahead in the cornfield to my right. I couldn't make out any features. It was just a dark shape, blacker than the shadows between the rows. My headlights didn't seem to touch it. "Hello?" I called out my open window. My voice sounded weak in the quiet night air. "You need help?" No response, no movement, just that tall black shape standing perfectly still. I put the truck in park and grabbed my phone. No service. Of course. The corn stalks didn't move either. There wasn't any wind. The usual cricket sounds had stopped. Everything was dead quiet except for my engine idling. I thought about getting out to check. Maybe someone was hurt or lost. But something in my gut said stay in the truck. I listened to my gut. I put the truck back in drive and started moving forward slowly. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. As I got closer, the figure stayed exactly the same. It didn't turn to watch me pass. It didn't make any sound. It just stood there. When I was parallel with it, about 15 feet away, I hit the high beams. The sudden brightness lit up the corn rows, but the figure remained pitch black, like a hole cut in the night. I pressed the gas harder. In my rearview mirror, I saw it was gone. Just empty corn rows where it had been standing. My heart was pounding against my ribs. I wiped my palms on my jeans and tried to calm down. Maybe it was just shadows playing tricks on my eyes. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Then I saw the second one. This one was in the soybean field to my left, about 50 yards ahead. It was moving, not walking exactly, more like sliding between the rows. No legs visible below its dark mass. Just smooth gliding motion. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor. The truck's engine roared and gravel sprayed behind my tires. The speedometer hit 60, way too fast for these roads, but I didn't care. The figure kept pace with my truck effortlessly. It moved parallel to the road, staying the same distance away, sliding through the soybeans without disturbing a single plant. I could see it clearly in my peripheral vision, but when I turned my head to look directly at it, it seemed to blur and shift. My hands were shaking on the wheel now. Sweat ran down my back. The truck's tires slipped on the loose gravel as I took a curve too fast. There was another one, standing in the corn on my right, then another in the soybeans, and another, and another. Black figures moving smoothly through the crops, keeping pace with my speeding truck. I counted 7 of them. They were all different heights. The tallest was like the first one, around 8 feet. The shortest looked about the size of a child. But they all moved the same way. That unnatural gliding motion, no legs visible, no sound, no disturbance to the plants around them. I was going 70 now. The engine whined in protest. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. The figures matched my speed exactly, spread out in a rough semicircle around my truck. My chest felt tight. I couldn't get enough air. Black spots floated at the edges of my vision. I forced myself to take deep breaths. Think. Sarah's farm was still 10 miles away. I couldn't maintain this speed on these roads for that long without crashing. I needed another plan. There was an old church about a mile ahead. I remembered passing it many times, a small white building with a gravel parking lot. Maybe I could stop there. Maybe these things couldn't come onto holy ground or something. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all I had. I saw the church's steeple silhouetted against the moon up ahead. The figures were still gliding along beside me, same distance, same speed. They showed no sign of tiring or falling behind. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, turning into the church parking lot. The truck fishtailed on the gravel. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought I would roll, but I managed to keep control. I slammed to a stop next to the church steps, gravel spraying. The headlights illuminated the white wooden walls and dark windows. I killed the engine and looked around wildly. The figures had stopped too. They formed a semicircle at the edge of the parking lot where it met the surrounding fields, just standing there, watching, waiting. I grabbed my phone again. Still no service. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely hold it. Movement caught my eye. One of the figures, the child-sized one, had glided forward a few feet into the parking lot. "Stay back," I shouted. My voice cracked with fear. It stopped. But then another figure moved forward. Then another. They were all slowly gliding into the parking lot now, closing the circle around my truck. So much for holy ground. I started the engine again. The figures were maybe 30 feet away now. 25. 20. I cranked the wheel hard and gunned it, aiming for a gap between two of them. Gravel flew as the truck shot forward. They didn't try to stop me, but as I passed between them, the temperature in the truck dropped so fast my breath clouded in front of my face. The engine stuttered. The headlights flickered. I felt a wave of dizziness and nausea. Then I was past them, fishtailing back onto the road. The engine smoothed out. The headlights steadied. The temperature slowly rose back to normal. In my mirrors, I saw them gliding back into formation behind my truck, pursuing. Always the same distance, always the same speed. My phone chirped. 1 bar of service. I fumbled it, unlocked, and hit Sarah's number on speed dial, trying to keep the truck straight with one hand. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" Sarah's voice was groggy. I'd woken her up. "Sarah, thank God. Listen, something's wrong. I'm being followed. There are these things in the fields." The phone cut out. No service again. I threw it onto the passenger seat and gripped the wheel with both hands. My arms ached from tension. Sweat stung my eyes. Up ahead, I saw more black figures emerging from the fields. Dozens of them. They moved into the road, forming a wall across it, blocking my path. I was going too fast to stop. The truck's brakes screamed as I stood on the pedal. The figures didn't move. At the last second, I yanked the wheel left, taking the truck off-road into the soybean field. The impact as I left the gravel nearly knocked my teeth loose. The truck bounced and shuddered over the rough ground. The figures in the road glided apart smoothly, letting me pass. Then they joined the others pursuing me. I counted at least 20 now, spread out in a wide arc behind my truck. Soybeans whipped against the undercarriage. The truck wasn't made for this. Something metal scraped and clanged underneath. The engine temperature gauge was creeping up. I could see lights ahead, Sarah's farm, the yard light, the barn light, warm yellow squares in the farmhouse windows, less than a mile away. The truck hit something, a rock or a dip, and the whole vehicle shuddered. Warning lights flashed on the dashboard. The engine made a horrible grinding sound. "Come on," I muttered. "Come on, just a little further." More black figures rose up from the fields ahead of me, forming another wall, blocking my path to the farm. I couldn't go off-road again. The truck wouldn't take it. I had to stop. I hit the brakes. The truck slid sideways in the soft dirt and came to rest at an angle. The engine died with a last tortured rattle. The figures closed in. Dozens of them now, gliding smoothly through the soybeans. No features visible, just black shapes against the moonlit crops. The temperature plummeted. My breath fogged the windshield. They formed a tight circle around the truck, 10 feet away, 8 feet, 6. I could see the farmhouse lights in the distance. So close. Sarah was in there, probably wondering about my weird phone call. probably debating whether to call me back. The closest figure stopped right outside my driver's side window. It was one of the tall ones, 8 feet of solid darkness. Slowly, a section of the blackness began to shift and separate, like it was opening, like it was forming a... I squeezed my eyes shut. My whole body was shaking. Sweat froze on my skin. A sound came through the glass. Not quite a voice. More like wind through dead leaves. More like radio static. More like... Jason? Sarah's voice. From outside the truck. I kept my eyes closed. You're not Sarah. Jason, what's wrong? Why are you parked in our soybean field? She sounded worried. She sounded exactly like Sarah. You're not Sarah, I whispered again. Jason, open your eyes. You're scaring me. I did, slowly. Sarah stood outside my window, illuminated by the moon. She wore her usual flannel pajamas and rubber boots. Her forehead was creased with concern. The black figures were gone. The temperature was normal, just empty fields stretching to the horizon. I saw... My voice was hoarse. There were... Let's get you inside, Sarah said. You look awful. Did something happen? I looked around again. Nothing but moonlit crops swaying gently in the night breeze. Normal cricket sounds, a dog barking in the distance. Yeah, I said finally. Something happened. But I can't... Come on. She opened my door. Tom's making coffee, you can tell us everything. I got out on shaky legs. We started walking toward the farmhouse. How did you know I was out here? I asked. Heard your truck engine racing across our field. Sounded like it was about to explode. Tom's going to be pissed about the soybeans, by the way. That made sense. That was normal. I looked back at the truck. The engine ticked as it cooled. Deep ruts marked my path through the field. Something caught my eye. In the dirt next to the driver's side door, a perfect circle of dead plants, brown and withered, about 8 feet in diameter, where the tall figure had stood. Jason, Sarah called from ahead. You coming? I jogged to catch up with her. I didn't look back again. But as we walked to the house, I noticed Sarah didn't leave any footprints in the soft dirt, and the crickets had gone quiet again. And when she turned to smile at me in the moonlight, just for a moment, her face seemed to blur and shift, like I wasn't seeing it directly, like I couldn't quite focus on it. I followed her anyway. What else could I do? The farmhouse lights beckoned warmly. A dark figure stood in one of the windows watching us approach. It might have been Tom. It might have been. The door opened as we reached the steps. Sarah went in first. I hesitated on the threshold. Come on in, she said in that perfect copy of my sister's voice. Tell us everything. I stood there for a long moment looking into the warm light of the farmhouse, looking at Sarah's familiar smile that wasn't quite right, looking at the tall dark shape that might have been Tom standing in the kitchen. Then I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a soft click. What else could I do? The voice outside thunder cracked. The lights went out. I heard my own voice calling for help from the darkness beyond my front door. I was alone in my house on Cedar Mill Road when the storm hit at 9:47 p.m. I remember checking my watch right before the power failed. The digital display showed those red numbers, then nothing. Complete darkness, except for the lightning flashes through the windows. I sat in my living room armchair. Rain pounded against the roof. Wind howled through the trees outside. Normal storm sounds. I knew them well after 15 years in this house. But then I heard it. Help, please, someone help me. The voice came from outside, maybe 20 feet from my front door. My voice, not similar, identical. The same tone, pitch, and rhythm I heard every time I played back a recording of myself. My hand gripped the armrest. The leather felt cold and damp under my palm. Sweat broke out across my forehead. I didn't move. Is anyone there? I need help. My voice called again. Closer this time. The words were clear despite the rain and wind. I reached for my phone on the side table. The screen lit up. No signal. Of course not. The cell towers always went down in bad storms out here. Another crack of thunder made me jump. My heart pounded against my ribs. I could feel each beat in my throat. The voice came again. Right outside the door now. Please. I'm hurt. Let me in. My legs shook as I stood up. The floorboards creaked under my feet. I took 3 steps toward the front door, then stopped. Who's there? I called out. My actual voice cracked. The words came out higher than normal. Silence. Just rain and wind. I walked to the kitchen. My hands trembled as I pulled open the drawer next to the sink. I grabbed my flashlight and the hunting knife I kept there. The rubber grip of the knife felt solid in my right hand. Back to the front door. My breathing came fast and shallow. Sweat ran down my back, making my t-shirt stick to my skin. Hello? I called again. No response. I reached for the deadbolt with my left hand, still gripping the knife. The metal lock felt ice cold. I turned it slowly. The click seemed impossibly loud. Wind hit me as I opened the door. Rain sprayed my face and chest. I pointed the flashlight beam out into the darkness. Empty porch. Wet wooden boards reflected the light. Rain fell in sheets, distorting my view of the yard. I stepped outside. The concrete felt rough through my socks. I hadn't even thought to put on shoes. The flashlight beam caught something in the mud of the front yard. Footprints. They led from the road toward my door, then stopped abruptly about 10 feet from the porch. Like someone had been walking, then vanished mid-step. My chest felt tight. Each breath burned. I swept the light back and forth across the yard. Nothing moved except the rain. I walked down the porch steps. The mud sucked at my feet with each step. Cold water soaked through my socks. The footprints were deep. Adult male size, about my size. The tread pattern looked exactly like my work boots, the ones sitting by the door behind me. I followed the prints back toward the road. They started at the edge of my property, coming out of the grass. No prints on the asphalt of the road itself. A car passed on the road, headlights cutting through the rain for a moment. The sudden light made me blink. When I looked back down, the footprints were gone. The mud was smooth, as if they'd never existed. I ran back to the house. My feet slipped in the mud. I fell once, catching myself with my hands. The knife blade cut into the ground next to my palm. Inside, door locked. I leaned against it, breathing hard. Water dripped from my clothes onto the floor. The power came back on with a hum. Lights flickered, then stayed steady. The TV in the living room started playing again. Some late-night show I'd left on for background noise. I went to the bathroom and stripped off my wet clothes. In the mirror, my face looked pale. Dark circles under my eyes. When had those appeared? Hot shower, clean clothes. I told myself I was being crazy. Stress and lack of sleep playing tricks on my mind. But I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I called the police, told them someone had been on my property. Left out the part about the voice, about the footprints disappearing. They said they'd send a car to drive by. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, the knife on the table next to me. The storm continued outside. At midnight exactly, the power went out again. In the sudden silence between thunderclaps, I heard footsteps on the porch, wet shoes on wood, then my voice, right outside the door. Let me in. Please, I'm so cold out here. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I know you're in there. I can see the flashlight beam through the windows. My voice said. But the flashlight was off, sitting dark on the table. Something scraped against the door, like fingernails on wood. You have to let me in. My voice had changed. Still mine, but wrong somehow. Deeper, hollow. You know you have to let me in eventually. I grabbed my phone again. Still no signal. The scratching at the door continued. I'll wait, my voice said. I can wait as long as it takes. Days, weeks, years. Time doesn't matter to me anymore. The scratching stopped. Footsteps moved away from the door. I heard them go down the porch steps into the mud. I sat there all night. The storm passed around 4 a.m. The power came back on at dawn. When the sun rose, I looked outside. No footprints, no marks on the door. Just a normal morning after a storm. I called in sick to work. Spent the day installing security cameras and motion lights. Bought new locks. Stronger ones. Night fell. Another storm rolled in right on schedule. The power went out, and I heard my voice calling from the darkness. It's been happening every night since then. Always during storms. Always my voice. Always getting closer to the door. The scratching gets longer each time. Last night it went on for hours. I could hear wood splintering. The police don't help anymore. They've been out dozens of times, found nothing. They think I'm crazy, maybe I am. But I know what I hear, what I see in the brief flashes of lightning, a figure standing in my yard, my height, my build, my face, but wrong, empty. The weather report says another storm is coming tonight, worse than the others. They're calling it a once-in-a-generation event. I'm sitting here writing this as the clouds roll in, thunder in the distance, getting closer. The power just flickered. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely type. There, and the first drops of rain on the roof. Wind picking up. The lights go out. Thunder crashes directly overhead. I hear footsteps in the mud outside, coming closer. My voice calls out, "I'm here, let me in. It's time to let me in." The door begins to splinter. I have to go now, have to hide. But I know it won't matter. You can't hide from yourself forever. My hands shook as I stared at the frost on my car window. 5 letters scratched into the ice. Ziggy. Just seeing it made my throat close up. No one had called me that in 23 years. Not since I was 12. Not since that winter. I stood in my driveway at 6:45 a.m., briefcase at my feet, travel mug steaming in the frozen air. The sun hadn't come up yet. The motion sensor light on my garage caught the ice crystals on my windshield. The letters were carved deep like someone had used their fingernail. My first thought was my wife Jenny must have done it as a joke. But Jenny didn't know about that nickname. I never told her. I never told anyone after I moved away from Millbrook. I reached out and touched the Z. The ice was thick, at least a 1/4 inch. The groove went all the way down to the glass. This wasn't a quick scribble. Someone took their time. A car drove past on the street. The headlights swept across my driveway. I jumped and spilled coffee on my tie. The hot liquid soaked through to my chest. I didn't care. I pulled out my phone and took 3 pictures of the name. Then I scraped it away with my credit card. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Tiny ice chips fell onto the hood of my Toyota. The garage light clicked off. I stood in the dark. The houses on my street were still dark too. Normal people were still sleeping. I always left early to beat traffic into Boston. I got in my car and locked the doors. The leather seats were ice cold. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, listening to my breathing. It sounded too loud in the quiet car. My phone said 6:52 a.m. I was already running late. I had a presentation at 9 rang, but I couldn't make myself turn the key. That nickname came from my red hair. I hated it back then. Kids at school would sing the David Bowie song whenever I walked by. But that's not why I stopped using it. That's not why I made everyone call me James starting in 7th grade. I pulled up my contacts and called Jenny. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. She always slept through her first alarm. "Hey, it's me," I said. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat. Did you write something on my car window this morning? In the frost? Call me back." I hung up and stared at my phone. The screen showed 6:54 a.m. Still no light in the sky. The logical part of my brain started working again. It had to be neighborhood kids. Maybe they heard my wife call me James and wrote random names on cars as a prank. Maybe they did it to every car on the street. I got out and walked next door. Bill's Honda was covered in frost, but no writing. Same with the Petersons' minivan across the street, just smooth white ice. Back in my car, I opened Google Maps. Millbrook was 4 hours away. I could drive there and back in a day. I could find out if he was still there, if he was still alive. No, that was crazy. I had a presentation. I had meetings all afternoon. I couldn't just drive to Millbrook because someone wrote my old nickname in some frost. I started the car. The engine turned over 3 times before catching. The heat came on full blast, cold air at first. I put it in reverse. My phone rang. Jenny's picture filled the screen. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong? Are you okay? Did you write something on my car this morning?" "What? No, I just woke up. What are you talking about?" I let out a long breath. "Nothing. Sorry I woke you. Go back to sleep." "James? What's going on?" "Nothing, really. I'll see you tonight." I hung up before she could ask more questions. The garage light clicked on again as I backed into the street. Must have caught my movement. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the end of my driveway. Just a dark shape in my rearview mirror. I slammed the brakes. When I turned around, no one was there. The motion light showed empty concrete and frost-covered grass. My heart pounded against my ribs. I drove to work on autopilot. My mind kept going back to that winter when I was 12, to the old Thompson house at the end of Pine Street, to the day they found Michael's body in the basement. The police ruled it an accident. They said he fell down the stairs while playing. But I knew better. I saw what happened, and so did the man who started calling me Ziggy that day. I walked into my office building at 8:15. Late, but not too late. I had time to run through my presentation again. Focus on work. Forget about this morning. My secretary Sarah looked up as I passed her desk. "Someone left this for you," she said. A white envelope sat on my desk. No name, no address. Just clean white paper. "Who brought it?" I asked. "Building security dropped it off. Said someone left it at the front desk this morning." I picked it up. The paper felt expensive. Heavy. The kind you buy at specialty stationery stores. "They say who it was from?" Sarah shook her head. "Just that it was urgent." I sat down and held the envelope. It wasn't sealed. The flap was tucked in. I could open it right now. My phone buzzed. Text from Jenny. "Seriously worried about you. Please call me." I ignored it. My hands were shaking again as I pulled out the paper inside. One sentence in neat black handwriting. "I know you saw me, Ziggy." The paper slipped from my fingers. I knocked over my coffee mug, reaching for it. Brown liquid spread across my presentation notes. "Sarah!" I yelled. "Who delivered this? What time?" She appeared in my doorway. "Security brought it up around 8. Why? What's wrong?" "Call them. Find out who left it. Right now." She hurried to her desk. I heard her picking up the phone. I opened my laptop with trembling fingers. Typed Millbrook Herald Archives into Google. Clicked through old newspaper records. Found it. December 12, 1991. Local boy dies in accident. Michael Thompson, age 13. Fell down basement stairs while playing with friends. No foul play suspected. The article didn't mention names of the friends, just said 2 other boys were present. Me and Danny Miller. Danny Miller. The man who started calling me Ziggy that day. Sarah came back. "Security says a courier dropped it off. No name, paid cash. They have security footage if you want to see it." "Yes, tell them I'm coming down." The security office was in the basement. Gray walls, fluorescent lights. 2 bored-looking guards watching a wall of monitors. "Here's the footage from this morning," one said. He clicked through camera views. The lobby at 7:45 a.m. A man in a black coat walking to the security desk, hat pulled low. He handed over an envelope and walked out. "Can you zoom in?" I asked. The guard clicked his mouse. The image got bigger, grainier. I still couldn't see the man's face. What about other cameras, the street? More clicking, the man walking away, getting into a black SUV, no license plate visible. That's all we have, the guard said. Want us to call the police? I shook my head. No, thanks. Back in my office, I closed the door and sank into my chair. The coffee had dried on my presentation notes. Dark brown stains made the words unreadable. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Jenny, 2 voicemails. I couldn't deal with that right now. I opened Google again, searched Danny Miller Millbrook. Nothing recent. A high school basketball score from 1996, a marriage announcement in 1999. Then, local man missing, October 2023. Danny Miller, age 44, last seen leaving work at Millbrook Hardware. Car found abandoned on Route 7. No signs of foul play. My chest felt tight. The article was from 4 months ago, around the time we moved into this house. The intercom buzzed. Sarah's voice. Your 9-hour presentation starts in 5 minutes. Cancel it, I said. Cancel everything today. Family emergency. Are you sure? The CEO is expecting. Cancel it all. I grabbed my coat and briefcase. Took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. Too enclosed, too slow. In the parking garage, I checked all around my car before getting in. Started it up and headed north, toward Millbrook. The drive gave me too much time to think, to remember that day in the Thompson house. The 3 of us playing hide and seek, Michael counting, me and Danny hiding. I picked the basement, dark, full of old furniture and boxes. Perfect hiding spot behind a stack of crates. Danny came down a few minutes later, found Michael at the bottom of the stairs, said it was an accident, said Michael surprised him and he pushed without thinking, made me promise not to tell, said we'd both get in trouble, made up the story about finding him later. The police believed us. 2 scared kids trying to help their friend. Tragic accident. But I saw Danny follow Michael down those stairs. Saw him push deliberately, not in surprise. Saw the look on his face as Michael fell. That's when he started calling me Ziggy, every day at school. A reminder that he knew I saw, that I was part of it now. 4 hours later, I pulled into Millbrook. Same small downtown. Same brick buildings and faded signs. Population 4327, according to the welcome sign. The Thompson house was gone, torn down years ago. New ranch-style home in its place. Clean siding, neat lawn. I drove past my old house. Different color now, but same porch where I used to sit reading comics. Same oak tree in the front yard. Millbrook Hardware was at the end of Main Street. Still open, fluorescent lights glowing in the winter afternoon. The bell jingled as I walked in. Smelled like paint and sawdust. An old man looked up from behind the counter. Help you? Looking for Danny Miller, I said. My voice sounded strange. Used to work here. The old man's face changed. Police already asked everything. 4 months ago. Nothing new to tell. I'm an old friend. Just heard about it. He studied me. Don't remember you. Moved away a long time ago. James Wilson. Used to go by. Different name then. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Ziggy? Little red-headed kid? I nodded. He came around the counter. Shorter than I remembered. Maybe I was taller. Danny was acting strange those last few weeks, he said. Paranoid. Said someone was following him. Watching his house. Did he say who? The old man shook his head. Police checked it out, nothing. Then his car turns up empty on Route 7. No signs of struggle, just gone. His house still there? Yeah. End of Pine Street. Wife moved out after. Couldn't take the memories, I guess. I drove slowly down Pine Street. Danny's house was dark. For sale sign in the yard. Dead leaves on the porch. A police car crawled past. The officer watched me through his window. Small town. Strangers got noticed. My phone rang. Jenny again. This time I answered. Where are you? She demanded. Sarah said you left work. Are you okay? I'm fine. Had to check something. Check what? You're scaring me. I'll explain tonight, promise. James. I hung up. The sun was setting, long shadows across the empty street. Movement caught my eye. Someone in Danny's backyard, walking between trees. I parked and got out. My feet crunched on frozen grass. The gate was unlocked. The figure disappeared around the corner of the house. I followed. Empty back porch, bare flower beds. No one there. Something reflected in the kitchen window. Writing in the frost. "Your turn to hide, Ziggy." My legs went weak. I grabbed the porch railing. Footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned. Danny stood there. Older, grayer, but those same cold eyes, that same smile. "Been waiting a long time," he said. "Knew you'd come back eventually, after I found you." "You're supposed to be missing," he laughed. "Amazing what you can do with a few rumors. A carefully abandoned car. Small-town police who don't look too hard. Why now? Saw you moved back to the area. Nice house in the suburbs. Beautiful wife. Good job. Perfect life." He took a step closer. I backed up against the railing. "Must be nice," he said, "living with no guilt. While I spent 30 years remembering that basement, Michael's face when he fell, the sound." "It wasn't an accident," I said. "I saw you push him." "Finally admitting it after all these years?" Another step closer. "Too late now, Ziggy. Way too late." His hand came up. Metal glinted in the fading light. I ran. Through the yard, past my car. Didn't stop until I reached Main Street. Looking back, the yard was empty. No sign of Danny. I drove straight to the police station, told them everything. The writing on my car, the note at work, Danny in his backyard. They checked the house. Nothing. No footprints in the frost. No writing on the windows. "Mr. Miller's been missing 4 months," they said. "No evidence of foul play. No evidence he's still alive." I insisted. Showed them the pictures on my phone. The frost writing was gone, just a clean windshield. The note from my office. Blank paper. They were kind about it. Suggested I was stressed. Imagining things. Guilt over an old accident playing tricks. I drove home in the dark. Called Jenny, told her I was okay. Just needed a day to deal with some old memories. Pulled into my driveway at 11:30 p.m. House dark except the porch light. Frost on my windshield again. No writing this time. I checked all the doors and windows before bed. Set the alarm. Jenny was already asleep. I lay next to her, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. "Found you." I got up and looked out the window. Empty street. Motion light dark. But I know he's out there waiting, writing messages in the frost. My turn to hide. Problem is, he's had 30 years to plan this game. And I'm running out of places to go. I found the TV last Tuesday. Should have left it there in that dark corner of the basement covered in dust and cobwebs. But I didn't. Now I can't sleep. Can't eat. Can't close my eyes without seeing what's on that screen. What's coming for me. The house seemed perfect when I bought it. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, decent yard. Price was right too. Foreclosure sale. Previous owners just vanished one day, realtor said. Left everything behind. Their loss, my gain. I signed the papers 2 weeks ago. I was checking out the basement that first evening, mapping where I'd put my workshop. The beam of my flashlight caught something in the far corner. Glass screen, wooden cabinet, rabbit ear antennas, an old tube TV from maybe the 70s. Heavy son of a bitch too when I tried to move it. Figured I'd see if it worked before hauling it to the curb. Took me 20 minutes to clean it up and find an outlet. Didn't expect anything to happen when I hit the power button, but it came on. Screen flickered, static hissed, then the picture cleared. I recognized the basement immediately. Same concrete walls, same support beams, same washing machine against the far wall. But this wasn't a live feed. The washer in the video was an older model, and the angle was wrong. like the camera was up in the corner near the ceiling. The timestamp in the corner read 06/14/1994, 3:47 a.m. The video quality had that grainy, washed-out look of old security footage. Nothing moved on screen for several minutes. Then something shifted in the shadows behind the washer. A hand emerged. Long fingers, pale skin stretched too tight over the bones. Then an arm, impossibly thin, a shoulder, a head. The thing pulled itself into view. It walked on all fours, but not like any animal I'd ever seen. Its limbs bent at wrong angles. Its head turned completely backward as it moved, face always toward the camera. The face, Jesus. No eyes, just smooth skin where they should be. Mouth too wide, filled with needle teeth. It crawled up the basement stairs. The video cut to another camera view. The living room. Same date stamp. The creature moved through the dark house, checking each room. Hunting. I hit the power button. Nothing happened. Unplugged it. The image stayed. The thing finished searching the first floor and headed upstairs. Another camera angle switch. It entered a bedroom. A man and woman slept in the bed. The creature stood watching them, head cocked at an impossible angle. Then it smiled. I grabbed the TV and threw it down. The screen cracked, but the picture remained. The thing turned toward the camera, toward me. Its mouth opened wider, wider, impossibly wide. Then the screen went black. I ran upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom. Didn't sleep all night. When morning came, I went back down. The TV was gone, just broken glass on the floor. But now I see things moving in the dark corners of my vision. Hear scratching in the walls at night. And sometimes when I pass mirrors, I catch glimpses of something standing behind me. Something pale. Something smiling. Last night I found old newspaper clippings about this house. June 15th, 1994. Local couple disappears without a trace. The previous owners before them vanished too. And the ones before that. The scratching is getting louder. Coming from the basement. I know what's down there waiting. I know what happens next, but I can't leave. It won't let me leave. The power just went out. My phone's dead too. I hear something crawling up the basement stairs. Slow, deliberate steps, testing each stair. It's coming for me now. Like it came for all the others. If you're reading this, stay away from this house. Stay away from old TVs and dark basements. Some things are better left forgotten in the dark. The doorknob's turning. I can see its shadow under the door. I can hear its smile. It's here. End. I'm truly sorry. I had to write this quickly. They told me to warn others. The thing in the TV. It spreads through stories about itself. Like a virus. Once you know about it, it can find you. I shouldn't have written this. I shouldn't have told you, but it's too late now. Don't look in the dark corners of your room. And whatever you do, don't turn around. It's right behind you. I hate basements. Always have. But that night, sitting in my living room at 11:47 p.m., I heard footsteps down there. Clear, distinct footsteps on concrete, not the usual house-settling sounds or pipes groaning. Footsteps. I lowered my laptop screen and sat still. The TV was off. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. The footsteps continued, heel to toe, slow and steady, someone walking around down there. My hand reached for my phone. 911 would take at least 10 minutes to arrive. The footsteps stopped. 3 seconds of silence. Then they started again. I got up from my couch. My bare feet touched the cold hardwood floor. The baseball bat I kept by the front door was 15 steps away. I counted each step as I walked there. The bat felt solid in my hands. Aluminum. Cold. The basement door stood at the end of the hallway. Dark wood. 3 locks, a deadbolt, a chain, and a padlock. I had installed all of them myself after moving in 6 months ago. Trust issues from my last break-in. I checked each lock, all secure, still locked. The footsteps continued below. My throat felt dry. Sweat formed on my palms. The bat almost slipped, but I gripped it tighter. I pressed my ear against the door. The steps sounded closer now, right below me. The light switch for the basement was on the wall next to the door. I flipped it on. Light spilled through the crack under the door. The footsteps stopped. My heart pounded against my ribs. I could hear blood rushing in my ears. The silence stretched out. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The footsteps resumed, moving away from the door now, towards the far corner of the basement. I looked down at my phone. 11:52 p.m. The screen was too bright in the dark hallway. I dimmed it and called David. He lived 2 houses down. 4 rings. Hello? His voice was groggy. Someone's in my basement. What? John, it's almost midnight. I hear footsteps. The door's still locked. Can you come over? Bring your gun. Silence on the line. Then rustling sounds. Give me 2 minutes, David said. I kept my ear pressed against the door. The footsteps continued their slow pace. Back and forth, like someone pacing. A knock at the front door made me jump. I walked backward, keeping my eyes on the basement door. David stood outside in sweatpants and a t-shirt. His Glock was in his right hand. You sure about this? He asked as I let him in. Listen. We stood in the hallway. The footsteps were clear. David's face hardened. He checked his gun. Called the cops? Not yet. Wanted to check first, make sure I wasn't crazy. You're not crazy. Someone's down there. He raised his gun. Open it. My hands shook as I unlocked the deadbolt. The chain came next. The padlock was last. Each lock made a distinct sound as it opened. The footsteps stopped again. David positioned himself to the right of the door. I stood to the left, bat ready. He nodded. I turned the handle and pulled. The door swung open. Cool basement air hit my face. The light bulb at the bottom of the stairs cast long shadows. The steps creaked under our weight as we descended. Concrete floor, bare walls. My washer and dryer stood against the left wall. Storage boxes piled in the corners. A water heater hummed in the back. No windows. One door leading outside still locked with its padlock in place. No one was there. Check behind the boxes, David said. We moved through the basement, checked every corner, behind every box. Nothing. Maybe they got out somehow, I said. David shook his head. How? Doors locked from the inside. No windows. No other exits. The footsteps started again. Right between us. David spun around, gun raised. I gripped the bat tighter. The steps moved across the floor, clear as day, but there was nothing there. Just empty air. We watched as dust particles were disturbed by invisible feet. A perfect trail of footprints appeared in the thin layer of dust on the concrete. Heel to toe. Heel to toe. Jesus Christ, David whispered. The footprints stopped in front of us. My breath froze in my lungs. The air temperature dropped. I could see my breath now. A box flew off the stack behind us. We spun around. Another box followed, then another. They crashed against the walls. Run, David said. We sprinted for the stairs. Something cold brushed against my back, like fingers made of ice. I stumbled. David grabbed my arm and pulled me up. We slammed the basement door shut. My hands fumbled with the locks. Click, click, click. All 3 secured. The footsteps pounded up the stairs. Something slammed against the door. The wood cracked but held. My car's outside, David said. We're leaving. Now. We ran. Didn't even close the front door behind us. His car started on the first try. The tires squealed as we pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw my house grow smaller. All the lights were on now. Every single one. Even though I had only turned on the basement light. We drove to David's house. His wife Janet was waiting up. She took one look at our faces and started making coffee. What happened? She asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. How do you explain something like that? David told her. His voice stayed steady, but his hand shook as he held his coffee mug. "You can stay here tonight," Janet said. "We'll figure this out in the morning." I nodded, but I knew there was nothing to figure out. Whatever was in my basement wasn't something we could understand or fight. We sat in their living room until dawn. Nobody slept. Nobody talked much. We just sat and watched the sky slowly brighten through their windows. At 7 a.m., David drove me back to my house. Everything looked normal in the morning light. The front door still hung open. Inside, nothing was disturbed. Even my cold coffee cup sat where I'd left it on the coffee table. We walked to the basement door. All 3 locks were still engaged. David covered me with his gun while I opened them. The basement looked exactly as we'd left it. Boxes scattered, dust disturbed. But now there was something new. Words scratched into the concrete wall. "I live here too." The letters were 3 feet high, deep gouges in the concrete, like they'd been carved by giant claws. We locked the basement door, all 3 locks. I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister in Connecticut. Listed the house for sale the next day. Sold it for well below market value 2 weeks later. Didn't care. That was 3 years ago. I live in an apartment now, 3rd floor. No basement. Sometimes at night I still hear footsteps. Not below me anymore, in the walls, getting closer. I've installed 3 locks on my bedroom door. But I know they won't help. They never did. The footsteps are louder tonight, like they're right on the other side of the wall now. Maybe it's finally found me. Maybe it's been here all along, just waiting. I hear scratching now. Metal on plaster. Words being carved. I don't need to look to know what they'll say. The wall is breaking. I can see claws coming through. I should run. But where do you run when the thing chasing you can follow you anywhere? When it's patient enough to wait 3 years just to finish what it started? The wall is gone now. I can feel its cold breath on my face. I never should have gone down to that basement. Never should have opened that door. Some doors are locked for a reason. Some things should stay buried. But it's too late now. It's here. And this time there's nowhere left to run. The footsteps have stopped. I know why. It doesn't need to walk anymore. It's already here, right behind me. I can feel its claws on my shoulder. Cold, sharp, home. The phone rings at 2:30 a.m. I hate that sound. Every late-night call I've ever gotten has been bad news. My eyes snap open in the darkness of my bedroom, and my hand reaches for the glowing screen on the nightstand. Unknown number. I press the green button and put the phone to my ear. A voice I don't recognize speaks 5 words that make my stomach drop. I'm right here at the door. The voice is male, deep, calm, too calm. I sit up in bed. The sheets are damp with sweat. My air conditioner died 3 days ago, and the August heat is brutal. I live alone in a 2nd-floor apartment in downtown Chicago. No one should be at my door at this hour. "Who is this?" I ask. My voice comes out hoarse. "Come to the door," the voice says. "I need to talk to you." It's the middle of the night. "Who are you?" "Just come to the door, David." He knows my name. My heart rate spikes. I swing my legs over the side of the bed and stand up. The wooden floor creaks under my feet. "How do you know my name?" "I know a lot about you," the voice says. "I know you're standing next to your bed right now. I know you're wearing gray shorts and no shirt. I know you're alone." My blood turns to ice. I spin around, scanning the windows. The blinds are closed, but there are gaps at the edges. Could someone see in? I back away from the windows. "What do you want?" I try to keep my voice steady. "Open the door, David. We need to discuss something important." "I'm calling the police." "No, you're not." The voice remains eerily calm. "Because if you do, you'll never find out what happened to Sarah." Sarah, my sister, missing for 3 years. The police investigation went cold after 6 months. No leads, no body, nothing. My hands are shaking. "What do you know about Sarah?" Open the door, and I'll tell you everything. I walk to my bedroom doorway and peer down the short hallway toward my apartment's front door. It's dark, but I can see the door's outline from the security light that bleeds in around its edges. How do I know you're really there? I ask. How do I know this isn't some sick joke? A loud knock makes me jump. 3 sharp raps on wood. Does that answer your question? The voice asks. My mouth is dry. The knock came from my actual door, not through the phone. He's really out there. I step into the hallway. The floor is cool under my bare feet. My phone feels slick with sweat in my hand. Tell me what you know about Sarah, I say. Tell me now, or I'm calling the police. Time is running out, David. You have 30 seconds to open this door, or I leave. And I take the truth about Sarah with me. How do I know you're not lying? 25 seconds. Just tell me something. Prove you know her. She was wearing a green sundress the day she disappeared. Silver sandals. A small silver necklace with a butterfly pendant. Your mother gave it to her for her 24th birthday. My chest tightens. He's right about everything. Those details were never released to the public. 20 seconds. I move closer to the door. My free hand hovers near the deadbolt. 15 seconds. If I open this door, how do I know you won't hurt me? If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have called first. 10 seconds. My heart pounds against my ribs. Sarah's face flashes through my mind. Her smile. Her laugh. 3 years of not knowing what happened to her. 5 seconds. I turn the deadbolt. The click sounds impossibly loud in the quiet hallway. Time's up, David. What's it going to be? I grab the doorknob, my palm is sweating. I take a deep breath and pull the door open. The hallway is empty. Hello? I step into the doorway, looking both ways down the corridor. Nothing. No one. Behind you, the voice says in my ear. I spin around. The phone clatters to the floor. A man stands in my living room. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that looks expensive. His face is angular, clean-shaven. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. How did you... I start to ask. Fire escape, he says. Your bedroom window wasn't locked. Careless, David. Very careless. I back toward the door. He takes a step forward. Don't run, he says. You'll want to hear this. Stay back. He reaches into his suit jacket. I tense, expecting a weapon. Instead, he pulls out a phone. Not a smartphone. An old flip phone. He opens it and presses a button. Sarah's voice fills the room. David, if you're hearing this... Her voice breaks. She's crying. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. You have to... The man snaps the phone shut. The recording cuts off. That's from 2 days after she disappeared, he says. Would you like to hear the rest? My legs feel weak. I lean against the wall. Who are you? Someone who knows what really happened. He slides the phone back into his jacket. Someone who can give you answers. But first, we need to talk about what you're willing to do to get those answers. What do you mean? Your sister stumbled onto something she shouldn't have. Something big. The people involved couldn't let her expose it. But they didn't kill her, David. She's alive. The room spins. I slide down the wall until I'm sitting on the floor. Where is she? That's complicated. He walks to my couch and sits down, crossing one leg over the other. The people holding her are powerful, connected. Getting her out won't be easy, or cheap. You want money? Eventually. But first, I need your help with something else. A small favor, you might say. What kind of favor? He reaches into his jacket again. This time, he pulls out an envelope. In your job at the bank, you have access to certain records, customer data, transaction histories, wire transfers. My stomach sinks. I can't give you that information. It's illegal. More illegal than breaking into a private residence in the middle of the night? He smiles again. We all break laws, David. The question is why we break them. You'll be breaking this one to save your sister's life. He holds out the envelope. I don't take it. How do I know she's really alive? That recording could be old. From before? Check your phone. I pick up my phone from where it fell. There's a new text message from an unknown number. I open it. It's a video, 10 seconds long. Sarah sits in a plain room with white walls. She's holding today's newspaper. She looks tired, thin, but alive. She says my name and the date. My hands are shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone again. That was taken 4 hours ago, the man says. I can arrange a live video call if you need more proof, but first take the envelope. I stand up slowly. My legs feel strange, disconnected from my body. I walk over and take the envelope. Inside is a list of names and account numbers. What do you want me to do? Access these accounts. Document every transaction over $50,000 from the past year. I want dates, amounts, and destination accounts. You have 48 hours. The bank's security is designed to track unusual access patterns, but you handle large accounts. You look up transaction histories all the time. No one will notice if you're careful. He stands up and straightens his jacket. One more thing, he says. Don't try to be clever. Don't leave yourself breadcrumbs or alert anyone. If you do, Sarah disappears again. Permanently this time. He walks to my front door. I don't try to stop him. 48 hours, he says. I'll call with delivery instructions. Oh, and David? He turns back. Fix that bedroom window lock. You never know who might come visiting in the night. The door closes behind him. I stand in my living room holding the envelope, listening to my heart pound. My phone buzzes. Another text from the unknown number. This one contains a video of Sarah from a different angle. She's crying, begging for help. The timestamp shows it was recorded 2 minutes ago. I sink onto the couch. The envelope crinkles in my grip. The list of account numbers blurs as my eyes fill with tears. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wails. My air conditioner unit sputters and dies again. Sweat runs down my back. Dawn is 3 hours away. In 48 hours, I'll either have the information this man wants or I'll lose Sarah forever. I open my laptop and log into the bank's system. The account numbers stare back at me from the envelope. Each keystroke feels like another step down a dark path. But what choice do I have? The sun rises. I'm still at my laptop. The man's words echo in my head. Don't try to be clever. But I am clever. I work in banking security. I know how to cover my tracks. Maybe I can leave a trail so subtle only the right people will find it. Maybe I can save Sarah without giving these people what they want. Or maybe I'll get her killed. The cursor blinks on my screen. The first account number waits to be entered. I take a deep breath and start typing. This is just the beginning. I know that. Whatever Sarah stumbled onto, whatever got her taken, I'm about to be part of it. The man in the black suit will be back. There will be more demands, more compromises. But Sarah is alive. That changes everything. I pull up the video again, freeze on her face. She looks scared, but there's something else in her eyes. Something that makes me think she's fighting wherever she is. I'm coming, I whisper to the screen. Hold on, Sarah. I'm coming. The account records load. Numbers and dates fill my screen. Somewhere in this data is the truth about what happened to my sister, and I'm going to find it no matter what it costs me. The morning light creeps through my blinds. Another day begins in Chicago. People wake up, go to work, live their normal lives. My normal life ended at 2:30 a.m. with a phone call. Now I have 47 hours and counting to decide, am I willing to become a criminal to save my sister? The answer, I realize, was never really in doubt. I start downloading the transaction records. This is my new normal. God help me. Something wasn't right at Joey's roadside cafe that afternoon. I knew it the moment I pulled into the empty parking lot, but I was too hungry to care. I'd been driving for 6 hours straight on Interstate 80, heading west through Nebraska. The dashboard clock showed 2:47 p.m. My stomach had been growling for the last 100 miles. The cafe sat alone on a stretch of highway surrounded by cornfields. A neon open sign buzzed in the window. The bell above the door jingled when I walked in. The place smelled like burnt coffee and old grease. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. They cast a harsh glow on the cream-colored walls and red vinyl booths. A long counter with chrome trim ran along one side. Empty metal stools bolted to the floor in front of it. "Sit anywhere," a voice called from the kitchen. I heard the sizzle of something on the grill. I chose a stool at the counter. The vinyl cushion squeaked under my weight. My elbows rested on a surface that felt slightly sticky. A laminated menu sat in front of me, its corners curled up from age. The cook emerged from the kitchen. He was a skinny guy in his 50s with thinning gray hair and food stains on his white apron. His name tag read, Earl. "Coffee?" he asked, already reaching for a mug. "Yeah, thanks." My voice sounded rough from hours of not talking. The coffee came out steaming hot and black as tar. I took a sip. It tasted exactly like it looked. "What'll you have?" Earl asked, order pad in hand. "Cheeseburger and fries." "Coming right up." He disappeared back into the kitchen. That's when I heard someone clear their throat 2 stools down from me. I turned my head. An old man sat there, though I hadn't heard him come in. He wore a brown tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows. His white hair was neatly combed. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. "Afternoon," he said, nodding at me. His voice had a slight southern drawl. "Hey," I replied. I hadn't expected company in this empty place. "Long drive ahead of you?" he asked. "Yeah, heading to San Francisco. Business or pleasure?" "New job." I didn't normally chat with strangers, but something about his grandfatherly appearance put me at ease. "Ah, fresh start. Good for you." He smiled. "I made that drive myself. Oh, must be 40 years ago now. Different times back then. Fewer cars on the road. More places like this." He gestured at the cafe. The smell of frying meat drifted from the kitchen. My stomach growled again. "What takes you out on the road today?" I asked, mostly to be polite. "Just passing through. I do that a lot these days. Retirement gives you time to wander." He chuckled. "My wife used to say I had ants in my pants. Couldn't sit still." "Used to." "She passed 5 years ago. Cancer." He said it matter-of-factly, no trace of self-pity. "I'm sorry to hear that." He shrugged. "Part of life, isn't it? We had 42 good years together. Can't complain about that." Earl came back with my burger and fries. The plate clattered on the counter in front of me. Steam rose from the food. "Can I get you anything else?" Earl asked. "No, this is good, thanks." The old man watched as I picked up the burger. "Food's decent here. Earl knows his way around a grill." I took a bite. The meat was juicy, the cheese perfectly melted. The bun had been grilled just enough to get crispy around the edges. "You're right," I said after swallowing. "This is good. Try the fries with some hot sauce. Earl makes it himself." I noticed a bottle of red sauce near my elbow. The label was handwritten, "Earl's Special Sauce." The old man kept talking while I ate. He told me about his years as a high school history teacher in Georgia, about his 3 kids now scattered across the country, about the RV he bought after retirement. I found myself relaxing as I listened. His stories were interesting, told with humor and insight. The tension from hours of driving eased out of my shoulders. "What's your name, son?" he asked during a pause in the conversation. "David," I said. "Pleased to meet you, David. I'm Thomas, though most folks just call me Tom." We shook hands. His grip was firm despite his age. The conversation continued. Tom told me about the best diners he'd found in his travels, about scenic routes I should consider taking, about the changes he'd seen in small towns across America over the decades. I finished my burger and started on the fries. They were crispy outside, soft inside. The hot sauce added a nice kick. "How long you been traveling?" I asked Tom. He thought for a moment. "Must be about 2 weeks now." Left Atlanta on the 1st of the month. Long trip. When you're retired, every day's Saturday. He smiled. No schedule to keep. No place I have to be. I noticed his coffee cup was empty. Want a refill? I asked, reaching for the pot. No thanks. I should probably get going soon anyway. Earl emerged from the kitchen again, wiping his hands on his apron. Everything okay out here? Great, thanks, I said. Could I get the check? Earl looked at me oddly. Check for what? The burger and fries. Oh, right. He pulled out his order pad. That'll be $12.50. I reached for my wallet. And whatever his coffee was, I added, nodding toward Tom. Earl's forehead wrinkled in confusion. Whose coffee? His. I pointed to Tom's seat. It was empty. I blinked, looked around the cafe. We were the only two people there. Sir, Earl said, you've been the only customer all afternoon. The empty coffee cup I'd seen in front of Tom was gone. The counter was bare except for my plate and mug. But there was an old man sitting right there. We were talking. His name was Tom. He was wearing a tweed jacket. Earl shook his head slowly. Nobody's been in here but you. I've been watching the grill, but I can see the whole dining room from back there. You've been sitting here alone, eating your burger. My stomach clenched. The food suddenly felt heavy inside me. That's impossible. We had a whole conversation. He told me about his wife, his kids, about being a teacher in Georgia. Sir, are you feeling okay? Earl looked concerned now. Maybe you should rest a bit before getting back on the road. I pulled out my wallet with shaking hands, put $15 on the counter. Keep the change, I muttered. I needed to get out of there. The bell jingled as I pushed through the door. The afternoon sun hit my face, too bright after the dim cafe interior. My car sat alone in the gravel parking lot. No other vehicles in sight. I fumbled with my keys, dropped them, picked them up, got behind the wheel and started the engine. As I pulled onto the highway, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The cafe grew smaller, its neon sign still buzzing in the window. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Sweat had soaked through my shirt. I drove west, pushing the speed limit. The cornfields stretched endlessly on either side of the road. The sun began to sink toward the horizon. My mind raced. Had I imagined the whole conversation? Was I more tired than I'd realized? But it had felt so real. Tom's voice, his laugh, the details of his stories, the way his glasses caught the fluorescent light, the firmness of his handshake. I remembered something he'd said about his wife dying of cancer 5 years ago, about leaving Atlanta on the 1st of the month. At the next town, I pulled into a gas station, found a local newspaper in the rack by the door. The date was October 15th. With shaking fingers, I opened the browser on my phone, searched for obituaries in Atlanta from 5 years ago. It took several tries to find it. But there it was, dated October 15th, 2019. Thomas Tom Wheeler, 72, beloved husband, father, and educator, passed away peacefully after a brief illness. A retired history teacher. The photo showed a man in a tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows. Wire-rimmed glasses, neatly combed white hair. The article mentioned his 42 years of marriage, his 3 children, his love of travel. My phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattered on the gas station floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, just like in the cafe. My reflection stared back at me from the store window, pale and wide-eyed. Outside, the sun had set. Darkness pressed against the glass. I thought about the empty highway stretching ahead of me, about the long hours of night driving to come, about how Tom had said he was just passing through. I got back in my car, sat there for a long time, engine idling, watching headlights pass on the interstate. Finally, I pulled out my phone again, called the number for the nearest motel. I wasn't ready to get back on the road. Not yet. Not while I could still hear Tom's voice in my head, telling stories about travels that had ended 5 years ago today. Not while I could still feel the ghost of his handshake firm and real. at a counter where Earl said I'd sat alone. The motel clerk answered. I booked a room for the night. As I drove there, I kept checking my rearview mirror. The highway behind me was empty and dark, but somehow I knew I wasn't alone. And I wondered how many other travelers had shared coffee and conversation with Tom at Joey's roadside cafe on empty afternoons when they were the only customer there. How many others had listened to his stories, never knowing they were speaking with a man who had taken his last road trip 5 years ago. I pulled into the motel parking lot. The vacancy sign cast a red glow over my windshield. Tomorrow I'd continue west, toward San Francisco and my new job, toward whatever future waited for me there. But tonight, I needed to sit with what had happened, to try to make sense of an impossible conversation at a roadside cafe in the middle of nowhere, to remember the strange afternoon when I shared a counter with a friendly stranger, who turned out to be no stranger at all. The sun was setting when I saw the other hiker waving at me from across the valley. I wasn't supposed to see anyone else out here. Not on this trail. Not in October. Not this far from civilization. I remember checking my GPS one last time before it died. 43-17N, 122-48W. Middle of nowhere, Oregon. 30 miles from the nearest town. No cell service. Just me, my gear, and now this stranger in the distance. I'd been hiking solo for 3 days. Started from the Umpqua National Forest trailhead on Monday morning. It was now Wednesday evening. My food would last another 4 days. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees at night. I carried a standard kit, tent, sleeping bag, water filter, first aid supplies, map, compass, basic survival gear. The stranger stood on a ridge about half a mile away. Dark jacket, backpack, seemed to be wearing a hat. Hard to make out details in the fading light, but the waving was clear. Both arms moving back and forth overhead, like flagging down help. I hesitated. Basic trail etiquette says you help others in trouble, but something felt wrong. My neck muscles tightened. Sweat formed on my palms despite the cold. The figure kept waving. Same motion, mechanical, like a loop. "Hello?" I shouted. My voice echoed across the valley. No response, just more waving. The smart move was to ignore it. Set up camp, wait for morning. But what if someone really needed help? I'd never forgive myself if I left someone stranded out here. I checked my watch. 6:47 p.m., maybe 30 minutes of usable light left. The figure was uphill from me, maybe 500 feet higher in elevation. Would take 20 minutes to reach them if I pushed hard. "I'm coming," I yelled. Still no response, just waving. I shouldered my pack and started climbing. The trail switched back and forth up the ridge. Loose scree made the footing treacherous. My boots slipped on the gravel. Sweat soaked through my base layer despite the cold. My breath came in ragged gasps. The figure kept waving as I climbed. Never stopped. Never changed position. Arms up, arms down, up, down, like a machine. At 7:02 p.m. I reached the spot where I'd seen them. Nothing there, just empty trail and scrub brush. The ridge dropped off steeply on the other side. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse, no answer. The light was failing fast now. Long shadows stretched across the valley. The temperature was dropping. I pulled out my headlamp and switched it on. That's when I saw it. A single hiking boot sitting in the middle of the trail. Men's size 11, Merrill brand. Good quality, practically new. Just one boot, perfectly placed like someone had carefully set it there. I picked it up. The laces were tied. The inside was dry. No signs of wear or scuffing. No blood or damage. Just a pristine boot left in the middle of nowhere. My hands started shaking. The boot felt wrong. Too light. Too clean. I dropped it and backed away. The sun vanished behind the mountains. Darkness flooded the valley like rising water. The temperature plunged. My headlamp beam seemed weak, unable to push back the wall of black. I needed shelter. Now. The nearest flat spot for camping was back down the ridge, maybe 10 minutes away. I'd passed it on the climb up. The boot sat there, taunting me. I turned and started down the trail at a careful jog. The beam of my headlamp bounced wildly. Shadows jumped and twisted. Every sound, a snapping twig, a rolling rock, made me flinch. At 7:23 p.m., I reached the camping spot, a small clearing just off the trail sheltered by a stand of pines. I'd never set up my tent so fast. Hands trembling, I got the poles assembled and the rainfly secured. Inside the tent, I pulled out my emergency radio. Worth a try, even though I knew there was no signal out here. Static. I tried all channels, nothing but white noise. I ate a power bar and drank some water. Tried to think logically. Could have been a prank. Some local kids messing with hikers. But this was seriously remote territory. And that waving, no one could stand there waving that long without varying the motion. Sleep wasn't happening. I sat with my back against my backpack, knife in hand. The tent wall seemed paper thin. Every rustle of wind sounded like footsteps. At 2:17 a.m., something walked past my tent. Slow, steady footsteps, crunching on the gravel. Coming from the direction of the ridge, getting closer, stopping right outside. I held my breath, gripped the knife tighter. The footsteps circled the tent once, twice, 3 times. Always the same pace, same pressure, like a metronome. Then they stopped, right by the door. I could see a shadow through the fabric. Someone standing there, not moving. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The shadow never moved, never shifted weight, just stood there. At 5:46 a.m., first light hit the tent. The shadow was gone. I waited another 30 minutes before unzipping the door. The clearing was empty. No footprints in the dirt. No signs anyone had been there. But placed carefully in front of my tent was a second boot, identical to the first. The left one this time. I broke camp in record time. Didn't bother with breakfast, just threw everything in my pack and started walking. Fast, staying on the main trail, heading for the nearest ranger station, 18 miles away. The day was clear and cold, sun bright overhead, birds singing. Everything normal, like last night never happened. But my legs were tired from the climb, had to stop every hour to rest. Each time I stopped, I scanned the ridges, looking for movement, for a figure waving. At 2:30 p.m., I heard footsteps behind me on the trail. Same rhythm as last night. Getting closer, I started running, pack bouncing painfully on my shoulders, lungs burning. The footsteps kept pace, never faster, never slower, just that steady mechanical rhythm. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsed by the trail, gasping. The footsteps stopped too, right behind me. I turned around. Nothing there, just empty trail stretching away through the trees. But sitting on a rock was a note, typed on plain white paper. 4 words. Thank you for coming. I made it to the ranger station by sunset, reported everything. They searched the area, found nothing. No boots, no note, no signs of anyone else on the trail. I checked the news for missing hikers, called local search and rescue. No reports matched what I saw. The GPS coordinates showed nothing unusual on satellite maps, just wilderness. That was 3 months ago. I haven't been hiking since, sold most of my gear, but I kept the note. It sits in my desk drawer. Sometimes late at night I take it out and read those 4 words again. The paper is starting to yellow. The typing is fading. Last week I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a pair of hiking boots. Men's size 11. Merrill brand. Practically new. And another note. Same typing. Ready for another hike? I burned the boots. Moved to a new apartment. Changed my phone number. But yesterday I was driving home from work and I saw something in my rearview mirror. A figure standing by the road, waving with both arms, that same mechanical motion. Up, down, up, down. I didn't stop, didn't look back. Just drove straight home and locked the doors, but I know what's coming. Tonight or tomorrow or next week, I'll hear those footsteps again. That perfect, steady rhythm, getting closer, and this time there won't be any more running. The thing is, now I understand why that figure was waving. It wasn't asking for help. It was greeting me, welcoming me, because it knew something I didn't, that once you see it, once it chooses you, there's no going back. You become part of it. Another watcher on another ridge, another set of boots left on another trail. I'm writing this down as a warning. If you're hiking alone and see someone waving in the distance, don't go to them. Don't try to help. Just turn around and leave that place. Run if you have to. Because if you get close enough to see there's nothing there, it's already too late. The sun is setting now. Through my window, I can see the street below, empty except for a single figure, standing perfectly still, both arms raised, waving. The footsteps are starting, same rhythm as before, coming up the stairs, getting closer, one flight away now, down the hall, outside my door. I have to go now. It's time. But remember what I told you, and if you're ever in the wilderness and see someone waving, just run. It started with voices, muffled voices from the guest room at 2 a.m. when I lived alone in my house. I know what I heard that night, and I know what followed. I need to tell this story exactly as it happened, no matter how hard it is to believe. I'd moved into the colonial-style house on Maple Street 6 months earlier, after my divorce. 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, too much space for one person, but the price was right after the market crashed. The guest room stayed empty except for a bed, dresser, and some boxes of Julie's old stuff she still hadn't picked up. That Tuesday night in October, I was up late watching reruns of The Office when I heard it. Voices, coming from upstairs. At first I thought it was the TV, but I hit mute and they continued. 2 or maybe 3 people talking, their words unclear but the cadence unmistakable, coming from the guest room. My heart started pounding. Sweat broke out on my forehead. I sat perfectly still on the couch, straining to hear better. The voices continued, rising and falling like normal conversation, but muffled as if through a wall. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by the bed. My hands shook as I gripped it. The wooden stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed them slowly, one at a time. The voices got slightly clearer, but I still couldn't make out words. They sounded calm, casual even, like people having a normal chat at a completely abnormal time in my locked house. The hallway was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. The voices were definitely coming from behind the guest room door. I pressed my ear against it, holding my breath to hear better. Can't keep doing this. A man's voice, tired sounding. Have to. A woman, her tone urgent. Not fair to. A different man, older maybe. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. I turned it slowly, carefully, trying not to make noise. It was locked. I froze. I never locked that door. There isn't even a key for it anymore. The previous owners lost it years ago, according to the realtor, but the knob wouldn't turn at all. I tried again, harder this time. Nothing. The door was definitely locked. The voices inside stopped abruptly. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Who's in there?" Silence. I pounded on the door. "I can hear you. Get out of my house or I'm calling the police." Nothing but silence now. Complete silence. I ran downstairs and grabbed my phone, dialed 911. 2 police cars arrived within minutes, lights off to not alert anyone inside. The officers searched the entire house while I waited outside. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. All windows locked from the inside. The guest room door was unlocked when they tried it. "Are you sure you heard voices, sir?" The older officer asked, shining his flashlight around the empty guest room. Sometimes the mind can play tricks late at night. I knew what I'd heard, and I knew that door had been locked, but I just nodded and thanked them for checking. What else could I do? They left. I didn't sleep that night, or much the next few nights. I installed a security system with cameras covering every entrance, changed all the locks. But deep down, I knew none of that would matter. The voices came back a week later. 3 a.m. this time. Same muffled conversation from the guest room. Same locked door that had no key. This time I recorded it on my phone, but when I played it back later, there was nothing but static. It kept happening. Every few nights at first, then more frequently. Always late at night. Always the same 3 voices having what sounded like normal conversations, but I could never quite make out the words. Always the inexplicably locked door. I started sleeping on the couch downstairs, started drinking more than I should. Considered selling the house, but couldn't face telling potential buyers about the voices. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. Then things escalated. One night in December, I heard something new mixed in with the voices. Crying. Deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from the woman's voice. The men's voices became more urgent, angry even. I sat at the bottom of the stairs, bat in hand, frozen in fear as the crying got louder. A crash from inside the room. Something heavy falling. More crying. I ran upstairs and grabbed the doorknob, still locked. "Stop it!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "Leave her alone." The crying stopped instantly. Complete silence fell. Then footsteps, clear as day, walking across the guest room floor toward the door. Slow, deliberate steps. I backed away, heart hammering. The footsteps stopped right on the other side of the door. I could hear breathing. Someone or something was inches away, separated only by that thin wooden door. I ran, down the stairs, out the front door, into my car. Drove to a motel and didn't come back for 2 days. When I finally returned, the guest room was exactly as it had always been. No sign of the crash I'd heard. The door opened normally. I went through every box, moved every piece of furniture, examined every inch of wall and floor. Nothing out of place. But there was something new. Something that made my blood run cold. On the inside of the door, at about eye level, there were 3 long scratches in the wood that hadn't been there before. I called a priest. Father Mike came and blessed the house, sprinkled holy water in every room, said he didn't sense any evil presence but would pray for me. The voices continued. I called a psychic. Sarah arrived with crystals and sage, spent hours walking through the house before telling me there were multiple energies present, but they weren't malevolent. The voices continued. I called a psychiatrist. Dr. Roberts prescribed anti-anxiety medication and suggested I might be experiencing stress-induced auditory hallucinations. The voices continued. Winter turned to spring. The voices became my unwanted roommates. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried. Always at night, always behind that locked door that shouldn't be able to lock. I learned to live with it, sort of. Stopped jumping every time I heard them. Started keeping a detailed log of when they appeared and what I could make out. Patterns emerged, always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., most active on weeknights. The woman seemed to be named Sarah, or Sarah. One man had a slight cough. They never acknowledged my presence, no matter how much I shouted. The door was always locked during their conversations, always unlocked after then came the night that changed everything. April 15th. I remember the date because I'd just finished my taxes. The voices started around 2:30 a.m., but different this time, all 3 shouting. Things breaking, the woman screaming, "No, please don't." I ran upstairs with the bat, ready to break down the door if I had to. The screaming got louder. A man yelled, "You brought this on yourself." More crashes. I slammed the bat into the door. The wood splintered but held. I hit it again and again. The voices and crashes grew louder, like they were feeding off my efforts to get in. One final hit and the door burst open. The room was empty, completely empty. No people, no broken items, nothing out of place. But it was freezing cold. My breath came out in visible puffs. The window was closed and locked. Then I noticed something on the hardwood floor. Water. A small puddle, spreading out from the center of the room. As I watched, it grew larger. The liquid was dark. I touched it with my finger. Blood. I stumbled backward. The puddle kept spreading. impossibly large now. The room grew colder. I could see my breath hanging in the air. The blood reached the doorway where I stood, and then I heard it. A whisper right next to my ear. The woman's voice, clear as day for the first time. "Help us." I ran. Again. Spent the night in my car in a Walmart parking lot. When I came back the next day, the blood was gone. No trace it had ever been there. That was 3 days ago. I haven't heard the voices since then. The door stays unlocked. The room stays empty. But something has changed. The air feels heavier somehow. Expectant. Like the voices are still there, just waiting. Watching. I found something else yesterday. Started going through old newspaper archives, searching for anything about the house's history. Found an article from 1985. A woman named Sarah Mitchell disappeared after an argument with her husband and his brother in their home. My home. Her body was never found. The men claimed she'd run away. The police investigated but couldn't prove anything. The article included a photo of the house. It looked exactly the same, except for one detail. The guest room window was broken in the picture. The caption mentioned it had been broken during what the husband claimed was Sarah's hasty departure. I'm writing this all down now because I know the voices will be back. They have to be. Sarah isn't finished. The men aren't finished. Whatever happened in that room in 1985 isn't finished, and I think I know why they chose me to hear them. Yesterday I was cleaning out more of Julie's boxes, finally getting around to it after the divorce. Found an old family photo album I'd never seen before. Flipped through it idly. There was a picture of Julie's grandmother as a young woman. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. The voices are back now. As I write this, I can hear them upstairs, clearer than ever. They're calling my name. The door is locked again, but this time I'm going up there. This time, I'm going to find out what they want me to know. This time, I'm bringing a sledgehammer. I don't know what I'll find, but Sarah deserves justice. Julie's grandmother deserves peace. And I deserve answers. If you're reading this and you don't hear from me again, you'll know where to look. The guest room, behind the locked door that has no key. Just listen for the voices.